afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our third Broward Housing Broward workshop series. We are really excited to have all of you. As you all know, the Coordinating Council of Broward has really been working to take the conversations around housing affordability and dive much deeper into them. We recognize that these are complicated, nuanced conversations, and we recognize that they cannot just be addressed in 15 to 30 minutes. And so I certainly want to acknowledge a number of people on this call. First and foremost, I really want to acknowledge our Coordinating Council of Broward Board Chair, Senator Nan Rich, who will share some remarks in just a minute. Without her leadership, Broward County would really not be in the position that we're in right now as it relates to addressing the housing affordability crisis. I also want to give a huge shout out to Yana, our CCB admin, for just being awesome in all things. I want to make sure to give a shout out to Ralph Stone, who is the director of the Housing Finance Authority and Community Development here in Broward County. And then certainly to our speakers who you will be hearing from: Nancy Robin from Habitat for Humanity Broward, Jane Bolin from Peyton Bolin and former mayor of Oakland Park, and Nate Parsons from the Realtor Association. But for now, I am going to turn it over to Nan. Good afternoon.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Sandra. And welcome to all of you who have joined for our third webinar. I'm very excited that we're doing this. For those of you who don't know, it's about now 7 years that the Coordinating Council was reconstituted, and I was elected the chair, but fortunately we hired Sandra as our executive director, and together we have this is a partnership, a collaboration all across the county with many of our agencies, especially human service agencies, working together and trying to develop and have people understand the needs in this community for affordable housing. I'm going to focus just my opening welcome remarks a little bit more on the condo crisis, since that's what this one kind of is highlighting, among other things, because I just do want to say that we have other people here, including Nancy from Habitat. Obviously, her goal and their goal is to keep homeownership alive in Broward County. And we want to make sure that we're working with them as well. They're doing unique, different kinds of things now to try and make sure that that is an achievable goal for people. So, and then also I just did want to thank Nate for joining. Want to say that we had, Sandra had asked Vicki Lopez, Representative Lopez, to join us, but fortunately she's up in Tallahassee dealing with the budget issues up there. But she has been a champion for condo reform. So as I'm sure all of you know, South Florida has kind of a disproportionate share of the state's condominiums, Dade being first, Broward second, and Palm Beach third in terms of numbers. And in the wake of the collapse of the Champlain Towers in Surfside in 2021, the state, as you know, mandated, many of you will know, mandated that people would need to go through the recertification process, and this created a whole issue for the condos, who for many years had defrayed costs for maintenance, and then it put a lot of pressure on this whole community. And of course, the housing costs at the same time were going up in South Florida, in Broward in particular. They have spiked significantly since the beginning of the pandemic. Additionally, we've seen a collapse in the property insurance market, which has added problems to the existing condo owners. And I have to tell you that, the condo owners are all ages, but what we're seeing is very specific in cases to seniors who came here many years ago, bought their condos, and have absolutely no way of paying for a lot of these repairs and recertifications of things. So it really compounds the issue for us in Broward County. I know that throughout my tenure in public office, we have tried hard to make it possible for seniors to age in place and to enjoy the retirement that they spent a lifetime planning for. So, as I said, many of those condos are completely unaffordable now for people living on fixed incomes. So the good news, I think, is that you'll be hearing today from several people who are subject matter experts on all of these areas, and who can speak not only to the state of Florida, the condo crisis, but strategies and ideas that can be things that can be done to address the complex problems that exist in Broward. So I thank them all for coming today. And I would like to go ahead and turn it back over to Sandra, and we'll all learn together today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator. So just some housekeeping. If everyone can please keep themselves muted. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to put the questions in the chat in case you don't remember it for whenever our speakers finish speaking. So what we'll do is we'll have Nancy speak first. After that, we'll hear from Jane, and then Nate will close us out. But we'll provide opportunity for questions should anyone have questions when anyone speaks. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Nancy Robin, the president and CEO of Habitat for Humanity of Broward. Nancy, I really look forward to hearing what you have to say, and then certainly if I have any questions, but really just wanted to give you kudos even before you started, because the speakers were talking before everyone else joined us. And even in a place where we keep saying there's no land, there's no land, there's no land, you're really finding a way to work with municipalities and continue that dream of home ownership for families across Broward. So thank you for that, and turning it over to you.
Thanks so much. And hello, everyone. I just wanted to kind of start out a little bit generally on what the habitat model is, because uh, Ralph, you may be smiling, but I know you've had to translate the actual model and how it works and why it works to many when we're looking to progress some of the projects that I've had the opportunity to work on with you directly. But with Habitat, Sandra, thank you. We do acquire land. We are a purchaser of land, and we also are always looking to partner with municipalities to seek land donations. And that is the big issue, and a big part of the issue that we're talking about today, because Broward County is an urbanizing market. We are a built-out market. 97% of our land is developed. Our population still continues to grow. And what does home mean? And what does home mean to the future of this county? And how do we progress that going forward? And, I think when we look back at Habitat, and traditionally the role that Habitat has played, and Habitat is in every corner of the country, it really is a movement to keep the dream of home ownership alive, and we want to do that. It traditionally has been a single family home, and in an urbanizing market, that's just not practical anymore. So, we are building now. We're bringing 3 townhome communities out of the ground as we speak. We have a couple behind it, and there are, I just got back from Naples, where all they're building is condominiums. So what home is and what home is in an urbanizing market is very different. And speaking briefly to Senator, when we started, and NIMBYism is still alive and well in terms of affordable home ownership. And, while we all know we need it, really, a healthy community must have it. It actually has been proven to increase values when we have it. So it's figuring out the solutions to these things. So with Habitat in the model, we acquire the land. We hopefully work with some municipalities that, while there's not much land left, that we work with them to donate land. What we are finding is the crisis is so intense right now. And, I compliment Broward County for putting together a master plan that incents communities to work to develop their own affordable plan, because we are having communities come to us that traditionally never supported affordable home ownership before, that now want to partner with us. We just successfully closed out a townhome community in Coral Springs, and we're looking at some other municipalities and partnering with them that traditionally would have never partnered with a Habitat before. Um, Habitat also, when we're looking at this, it gets more complex because it's not infill building, we're developing land as well. And on developing land, what we're finding there is infrastructure costs and rising costs are making it a lot more challenging. But you need that for density building, and you need to be good at infrastructure and developing communities. And part of that is probably, what Jane is going to get into, and how is that infrastructure sustainable going forward. And then Habitat is a builder, and we actually construct it. A lot of our building is done with volunteers, which is part of our model, because the largest impediment to home ownership typically is the down payment. And our homeowners form community and earn their down payment through building their home and that of their neighbors. We also have a critical repair division, which keeps people in their homes, particularly seniors, so that they can age in place. So part of the mission is building new homes. Part of the mission is keeping people in their homes. And the other part that makes the model work is we're also a mortgage company. And in being able to, control the closing costs, control the interest rate, control the term of the mortgage, it makes it work. And quite frankly, when we look at the complexity of all these problems, at the end of the day, it's about subsidy and how can we bring private partnership together with nonprofit and with public to make this work, because it's too big of a nut for any one sector to carry. For us, going forward, and the topic today is condominium. It is, how do we move forward to keep that dream of homeownership alive in an urbanizing market with creative, whether it's co-op, whether it's condo, and how do we create our model so that, situations where there's assessments with existing condominiums, and seniors are at risk of having no place to go, where do we play a role in that, in helping an aging housing stock remain sustainable? So with that, I think I'm going to pause. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about the model. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to advocate for keeping the dream of homeownership alive when it appears to be more challenging than it ever has. We know that a third of the wealth in our country was built on homeownership. And I'm also glad, to see our realtor friends on this call as well. But figuring out ways past these obstacles, are key really for the foundation of our country. And I feel blessed to be able to do the work that I do at Habitat. Because it's providing hope when 95% of our community cannot afford the average median price in our county. So I thank everybody who's on this call. All of you all are advocates. And I appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk about something that I'm so passionate about.
Nancy, I don't know if anyone else has any questions, but I quickly would love to hear a little bit more from you. As Habitat shifts to that model, whether it's condos or townhomes, it's still sort of shared space. So how does the Habitat model account for some of those, assessments and things that condos are really kind of grappling now what's Habitat's response looking forward in the future to mitigate against, someone being foreclosed on because they can't afford the assessment or, or whatever the case, or the insurance.
Yeah, I can speak to it coming out of the ground because we actually have some existing, we've been around for over 40 years. So we have some existing developments and we look at those lessons and how can we learn from those lessons so what we're building going forward is more sustainable. And I really think the answer to that in large part is a partnership with public and private. And an ex an example of that is utilities. They've skyrocketed. So, when you have that situation and it's a condo association or an HOA, it can break that condo when you see that happen. So it really is, even thinking about very basic things about, how can we separate utility hookup so that it still is carried by the municipality versus the HOA. We have to look at different solutions for sustainability and to keep the costs down. With keeping people in their homes, a big part of our work is critical repair and fortification for potential climate. And I think, I do see us probably leaning in to partner on, some of what's going on with these condos and, our fundraising might turn to keeping, hundreds of people in their homes that are, being hit that way. So, thank you for that question.
And then my second question, and I do want to open it up if anyone has any questions, the habitat model and home ownership and that dream of, a single family home with a garage and the white picket fence has really been tied together. What's some of the feedback that you've heard in other areas where they are doing condos and townhomes on what they're hearing from the end user and the families on whether or not there's any type of disconnect between the dream of having your own home, right? Where you think your own home, your own property versus something that's a little bit more shared, like a townhome or a condo.
Yeah, I think it's just normalizing culture. It's so interesting, like when you look at, New York City or you look at Silicon Valley or, you look at, places outside of this country that are urban, that is the norm. And, I really think that that question is more psychological because it is the future.
I appreciate that. Nancy, thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions for Nancy?
Sandra, we do have a question in the chat.
We do have a question.
I think that's a question I can answer.
Oh, I see that here. Okay, yeah. So we're gonna be getting, I mean, I don't know if Jane's giving out direct legal advice, but certainly something that I'm sure she's gonna tackle. Nancy, thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. I continue to look forward to seeing what's coming out of the ground, and to hear all the great stories from, from the families and the great stories that I hear from the volunteers that really feel good about knowing that they are helping to make that dream of permanent housing possible for families. So thank you for that. All right, we are moving on next to hear from Jane Bolin from Peyton Bolin. You either know Jane through her fantastic work with Peyton Bolin. Perhaps you might know her as the former mayor of Oakland Park. Perhaps you might know her for any of the wonderful organizations that she is a part of. She has served on the board of the Community Foundation of Broward, and has been involved with a number of local organizations as well. Jane, you are always a phone call away. You are a wealth of knowledge. You are part of my kitchen cabinet as well. And we're really excited to hear from you today, specifically because in the work that we've done, and Senator, I'm sure you'll back me up on this, the first several years, it was really all about rental, 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 rental. And I think that there were, I remember Ralph and I talking about the first time, and it really wasn't a big deal, although Nate, I'd love to hear if it was a big deal for you, but I remember the first time that the average cost of a condo in Broward County exceeded, what was it, Ralph, $200,000? And we were like, whoa, this is monumental, because as single family home ownership became unaffordable, buying a condo was always sort of the next best thing. And so first it was during COVID when the prices started to increase. And then it was all the hurricanes, and then it was insurance, and then the unspeakable tragedy in Surfside. And now I think for the first time in Broward's history, we're all grappling with, hey, wait a minute, if our long-term vision was always, if nothing else, you could get a small condo and survive, and now that is at risk too, what does that look like? And so Jane, your experience with HOAs, it looks very different. A lot of these HOAs are just people that live in the building. We've heard a lot of stories that ran the gamut from well run to not so well run. And so how does that really tie into all the things that we're talking about affordability and sustainability in the future? So
Sure.
really looking forward to hearing from you, and Jane, take
Great.
it away.
All right. So I appreciate the opportunity. I would say to you, I think we should start first with context. So an association is a common interest community, and it can be an HOA, or it can be a condo, or a cooperative. And what I think is important about that is, words matter. We use them for different terms, but when we're talking about a condominium and the condo crisis, I'm thinking about condominiums as defined by Florida Statute 718, which is the Condominium Act. Now, just as a little bit of background, there are approximately about 28,000 condominiums in the entire state. And the average size of units, there's about 56 units. That's the average. And Miami-Dade and Broward combined have 34% of the state. So we have probably 9,500 associations with an average size of 61 units. So how that relates to the number of people, I think I don't have the math to extrapolate that, but we're impacting a lot of homeowners and occupants, right? People in our communities. So it's important to see that, one, it's a large sector of housing. Two, it's a unique sector. So what does that mean? Well, a condominium is really something that's created by a contract. That's called the Declaration of Condominium. And that tells us how a condominium functions, how the board is elected, what is happening, and what rights and restrictions run with the land. So why does that matter? The condominium is a business, folks. It's a not-for-profit business under 617 Florida statutes. And what we're talking about is volunteers running not-for-profit businesses with budgets of 100,000 to several million. So it's interesting to, one, get that perspective. I think it's like, wow, this is a business. I wrote a little book called Mastering the Business of Your Association, because it is a contextual shift. Like, oh, this isn't just my neighborhood and my community neighborhood association. This is actually a business that we run. So Florida in 1971 created the Condominium Act. It got very little attention until 2010. Major overhauls started, okay? And then, of course, after Champlain Towers and that tragedy, after 2021, people started to really talk about the reforms. We're now on Condo 4.0 reform bill that's still waiting for the governor's signature. So it's important to understand there's a lot that's at play. This is a community that's governed by its covenants and restrictions that are in the condominium deck, and it's governed by statute. And we're asking volunteers of a variety of levels of education, experience to run a business. And then on top of that, it is a business in and of itself. Community associations, you have management companies, you have vendors, there's an entire world around it, including banking. And that's not just for the loans and special assessments. So there's a lot of players that interplay here. And I think that's important when you think about what we're calling the condo crisis, because after, the SB 40 was the first, don't worry about the number, it was the first big bill. And I feel like we started to look at, hey, how is this run? Why don't they have reserves? Because that must have been the reason why the tragedy happened. Now, that tragedy had a variety of reasons, but what may surprise all of you on this call is that reserves have always been required in Florida pursuant to statute, always required. And you've had the opportunity to waive it. And that's what people have done. And there's nothing, nothing wrong with this, but understand that as a volunteer, your objective may be, I don't want to increase assessments. Understandable. And so what happens is then proverbially we kick the can down the road and things don't get handled. And so you have some nicer buildings, some less nicer buildings, and they were able to do that. So effectively now with the new legislation, we have been able to say that reserves are required for very particular components, and they're structural integrity components. It's also required that there be what's called a reserve study done. So prior to this legislation, structural integrity reserve studies were optional. They were best practice, but literally, again, our volunteers would say, how much would a roof replacement be in 10 years? Well, maybe we'll just put that much in there. Now you actually have professionals that can support you with it. So this is all very good, but it has the iterations of it have created a squeeze. And the deadline to have CSRS done was actually, the beginning of this year. It's now, if this bill is signed by the governor, which I just need to give that asterisk right now, it will push out for another year. And on top of that, that's just a study. Now we also have what's called milestone inspections. So to the credit of Miami-Dade County and Broward County, we've always had recertifications, okay, which are now very clearly milestone inspections can be used for recertification. They basically took this model and said, let's create milestone inspections for the state because we need to be looking at the actual, what's happening in these buildings. All wonderful, but creates quite a crunch because what we're talking about is again, not-for-profit business, the condominium, runs on a budget and really only has one source of income, which is the assessments from owners. And at this point, if they don't have enough money, what happens? It's the term special assessment that we hear about now, right? That's what everyone's talking about, the squeeze. They're getting hit with assessments they're not anticipating, and the association's able to do that. Also, Florida statute, Condominium Act, allows the association to foreclose on a unit owner who does not pay their assessments. Now, that could be an entirely separate discussion, the iteration of how that's worked. But there have been some changes to how collection of a debt happens. And that's eased some things up because it's taken attorneys out of what I'm going to call step one, which is the demand letter, and really only has attorney involvement, which of course increases prices until lien and foreclosure. But I guess the point is there's a lot of moving parts here. And you're dealing again with a business that, is not going to have a traditional line of credit. Despite the new legislation, HB 913 specifically says that an association can get a line of credit or a loan to fund their reserves. But the question is, do banks even have that ability to provide that kind of line of credit that's available? I actually don't know if the products are there yet. So there are some things that are happening, moving out the date of CSRS requirement, allowing the association, if they're in the middle of a milestone inspection, to actually pause their CSRS funding, which is a great thing, to reassess once they do the work. That's all in HB 913, and it should give some relief. I definitely think it's a great starting point. But there are some things in there that make it a little confusing. So owners can seek to have substitute budgets if the next year's budget is more than 115%. I mean, that's in the statute at the same time. So I think there's a lot of good effort. We're not quite there yet. And already Condo 5.0 is going around the circles of attorneys who do this work and those that are interested, right? The lobbyists, certainly we're already talking about it. But the reality is what we're not talking about is how do we deal? There's nothing that mandates the requirement for payment plans. There's nothing that requires that boards actually provide a tiered outlook on the budget. I think there's some things, practically speaking, that could be done. But again, you have both volunteer board members, management companies, managers, licensed and professional, and we're all trying to figure this out. In the current model we have, and like what Nancy said, looking at the new model, like what's the future, right? And so I think there's a lot to look at when we think about the covenants of the Declaration of Condominium in terms of really tightening up and creating better process for budgeting versus just saying in the statute, this is when it must be done. There must be a 14-day notice. Here's the requirements. yes, it's great for owners to have the option, as I stated just previously about the substitute budget, but we're not nailing it, right? There's some practical work. It's a business. How that budget is done, what is considered. Yes, reserve specialist help. So SIRS is a great thing, but we're not looking at the long term. And there's been no discussion around how can the association, and I know there's an implication for tax purposes, but how can the association monetize some of the assets they currently have? So you want to talk about spaces that can be developed. There are certainly inside of associations parcels I can think of that are just sitting there that members have said, hey, maybe we could do a garden over there. Or we could do something else. There's certainly an opportunity, but again, a volunteer board that's just trying to make it through their own lives and then deal with what I would call a 20+ hour a week job that is unpaid as a board member on your condo may not be thinking about any new opportunities. Now, I'm not saying that should be something in legislation, but I think it is the conversation for how do we look at this differently and how do we support? So when I think about the silver tsunami, which Sandra, you have absolutely been the one who has educated me on, I'm clear that something around how budgeting works, tiered payments, I think there's an opportunity, but people are not really open to talking about that quite yet. And I don't want it to be in 718. Frankly, I don't think that's where it is, but I do think it is a conversation we could start and then look at how to still have the pro rata share be the same, but with some consideration that we may have retirees, we have folks who are living on fixed income. What does that look like? Literally, my advice, unfortunately, after COVID or during COVID to these associations that said, what do we do? People aren't paying. I said, the first thing we need to do is exactly what Senator Rich said in the beginning, public-private. What does this look like? How do we, and so I talked about doing outreach to other charitable organizations to see how we could work together. But that's just the starting point. It's every association is incredibly unique. You know, a condominium on the beach is not like a condominium in Tamarack. It's not like a condominium in Oakland Park. And just because a condominium's on the beach doesn't mean they're not suffering the same issue, right? And they may be the building that's kicked the maintenance down the road and truly has to have a large assessment, which also brings me to one more issue. I'll just bring it up, which is termination. So under Florida Statute 718, Condominium Act, associations can be terminated. Condos can be terminated. I just had a conversation with a practitioner yesterday, another colleague, about assessments that were going to be $80 million for two high associations. Let's just call them high story associations. $80 million makes no sense. Why would we even go down that road when the average price of the units are $250? No, we already know no one can afford it. But who's giving them the counsel to say, look, this is the worst ever, but let's talk about termination because we may be able to actually pay you much more than the value of this. But of course, it brings me the other question, right? We're in the circle, which is, well, where are they going to buy that they can afford now, right? So, but I think there's so many other conversations and I often don't hear about them. It's not what's covered in the news. But there are alternatives. And this is exactly the place where we have to get really creative. The way I work with my clients, I can tell you already, we've seen an uptick in collections. We've seen it. It's coming. And we're preparing for it. We're hiring new paralegals. We're preparing for it. And this feels like 07, 08 preparation, which I don't like because nobody wants to take your home. So with that preparation, we're now talking to our clients about what are payment plans that are reasonable, that can be fair across the board, you know, because the association can't pick and choose and decide you're going to get one and you'll have another based on your story, but they can say, look, let us come up with a tiered approach. That's certainly a possibility. So I think there's a lot that can be created in the space, but we need to get creative. We need to talk to each other. We need to bounce the craziest ideas out to see what might actually be possible. And, you know, Nan, when you were talking about Habitat in Naples with the condos, I got really excited on our pre-call because I firmly believe that if we could change some of the bylaw language, look at the declaration, we can do some things that might be quite unusual. Now, They will all be subject to 718, which changes now almost every year. And we can't entirely make it 718 proof. But there is some nuances for other condominiums that were built before 718 came around in 1971 that didn't have any language even after that, about the Condominium Act. And those associations are saying, we're not following 718, and they're getting legal, and that's okay. It's a legal interpretation. But the ones that are happening now, I think we got to work at it part and parcel and look at it. So if the association has the right to lien and foreclose, we should really create a much stronger consumer-friendly collections process that takes it out of the collection agency and attorney hands until it's absolutely required, because that's not going to change in the legislature, right? So that's what I want to leave you with is there are a lot of changes in the law. I can tell you some of the things. Reserves previously were for options that were 10K or more. They've now moved it up to 25K or more, but those are non-SERS reserves. That's like your pool, your painting, things that are not that may or may not impact the structural integrity, right? So there's been some great movement. Do I think it's going to end up with our associations having a better handle on how they budget and deal with payments? No. And I think that's where we need to open the conversation.
That was a lot to digest. I really appreciate that. I don't know if anyone else has any questions. I know that Lucy still has that question in the chat.
Sure, I can answer that.
Also, I wanted to, and this is obviously purely a speculative question, but from the development community, I'm hearing buzzes of some of these smaller garden style properties that are old, that have, a lot of lower income seniors or lower income households that are living in it, that are being looked at as perhaps redevelopment opportunities. And so instead of the burden of, and so, what is that, is there something good that we could find in that? Does that not, what are some of your thoughts on what the future development opportunities are for some of these smaller parcels or some of these smaller properties where they don't know if they're going to be able to bring it up after 40 years?
Yeah, so there's a lot of interest in this. I've heard the same thing. I think that when you look at these smaller parcels, 2 stories or less, so they're not SERS, they're not required to have SERS, but they're older. I think it's not just termination. I think it's negotiating the termination so the owner gets a unit in the new building with a set rate. And nobody's talked about that yet, but it's possible. It can absolutely be done if we write that into the covenants. It's no different than saying the idea of a condo hotel was created at one point. Mixed use developments have been created. Why don't we have a mixed, I don't know if the use is the word, but a mixed residential building where former owners can benefit from the new building and, maybe they're credited their assessments for X number of years. I mean, you can get super creative if you're willing.
Nan, do you think that you, me, and Jane could perhaps have a follow-up conversation about some of those ideas?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think
Offline,
it's worthy that, because I agree with you, Jane. I mean, we're looking at a lot of different areas now where there are, buildings that are, just not probably ones that you'd want to renovate, smaller buildings. And the developers, Ralph is on, I can tell you, I mean, a lot of those are pieces of land that are, I mean, I'm more and more, we're hearing people buying up a piece of land that has a small something or other on it. And,
Right.
and usually they're just going to knock it down, get rid of it,
Right.
So because of the land issue. So but you brought up a lot of really good ideas, I think, that we could, begin to talk about. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Definitely connect. I can answer Lucy's question in my very lawyerly way, which is, Lucy, I'm not giving you legal advice. But there's nothing in the statute that prohibits an increase just based on a monetary amount. You may have in your governing document, so in the Declaration of Condominium, some percentage threshold that they can increase or not increase by, but there's nothing that says it's illegal to do that. Yeah. So that's the best answer I can give you. And then I would encourage you to look at the Declaration of Condominium.
You had that with Century Village in my district this year in Pembroke Pines, where the original thing was they were going to raise them $700 a month. I mean, it was, they freaked out. I mean, and rightfully so. And that didn't
Absolutely.
happen. I mean, I'm sure that things were delayed. I know some things were done because I've gone to a couple of meetings, but but that's an incredible amount that people just absolutely who bought those condos for the kind of prices, that they did in the original Century Village. It's just impossible. And on fixed incomes couldn't possibly do that. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, you could evict the whole building, I guess, is like, but it's not.
No, and then you just have a board that has a bunch of abandoned units. Makes no sense, right?
Not good. Not advisable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Jane, thank you for that. We are definitely going to follow up with you. I would imagine people aren't asking questions because just like me, they're like, "Oh wow, that was a lot. That was a lot." But again, that's really the intent of these conversations. So thank you for that. I know I will not be the only person that goes back to listen to everything that you said again, because we read so many articles and we hear it in the papers and we're hearing all of these things and there's such a disconnect. And so thank you for kind of bringing that all back in a way that, that we're able to kind of take a little bite, one bite of the apple at a time. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.
All right. And then Nate Parsons from the Realtor Association. Again, Nate, thank you so much for pinch hitting for us. We were really hoping for Representative Lopez to be able to bring that perspective from Tallahassee, but she is up there working on the budget. And really, we couldn't have asked for someone else to really step into the role. We're really excited to see some of the data that you're going to share. And I know that I'm going to have some questions for you if everyone else does as well. So without further ado, take it away.
Thanks, Sandra. I'll give some comments first and then go into the data and the PowerPoint, but I appreciate being able to be here. Tough act to follow, former Mayor Bolin. And as I've mentioned on our pre-call, it's always a pleasure to be here with Senator Nan Rich, who's such a staunch housing advocate. The Realtor Association, is steadfast in our commitment to our communities and working with clients in all walks of life. We heard earlier about the dream of home ownership, and that's really what the Realtors Association is all about. And it does look different this day and age. It's not just single family homes. We do need to look at different housing types and different price points and different options and opportunities. So I appreciate being able to speak a little bit about that today. I know I'm no replacement for Representative Lopez, who, for those of you who don't know, did carry the condo bill this past session, one of the condo bills. There were a few condo bills, as former Mayor Bolin mentioned, but condo bill HB 913 is the one that made it across the finish line. It passed both chambers and it's currently waiting for the governor's signature. I believe we're referring to it as Condo 4.0, but even Condo 4.0, incremental change is great. And I do truly believe don't let perfect get in the way of progress, but it is an issue that we need to keep working on and we need to keep taking steps towards. It's not a problem that's going to be solved overnight, and it's not something that we can just, rubber stamp and say, okay, we tackled condos. This is an ongoing thing, and just Nate's opinion, not necessarily the realtor's opinion, but I think condos are the next frontier. We know that property insurance is a big issue. I think those issues are going to commingle, and condos is going to be the multi-billion-dollar question that we're seeing. It's already on the horizon. So just from a realtor's perspective, similar to some of the things that my fellow panelists have mentioned, we're looking at creative solutions. We're recommending to clients and investors and developers things like adaptive reuse, taking underutilized commercial property and turning it into housing. We had the Live Local Act, which, takes a look at zoning, but again, Nate's opinion, not necessarily the realtor's opinion. The Live Local Act has some good things in it and has some things that need to be fixed. It is a piece of legislation that, in my opinion, every year we should be going back and doing glitch bills and fixing things to really encourage housing solutions. There's no reason why developers should be building affordable housing, workforce housing, attainable housing, or getting the permits and getting approved for that, but then turning around and saying, well, actually, I can make more money by doing market rate, and I'm just going to eat the fine because I'll make more money. That's not acceptable. So the realtors are looking for ways to identify additional funding, additional housing assistance, grants, and we're also looking at transparency. We think that that's a good avenue to kind of have an informed citizenry, and allow people to make informed decisions and not be caught, on the back foot with a lot of these assessments and these significant costs, especially when you're a retiree or someone on a fixed income. That's just, adding fuel to the fire when it comes to affordability. So at risk of getting in trouble with Harrison and Senator Rich, that's a conversation for another day. But we are looking at what we can do locally, and we are going to be approaching the county commission at some point. But without further ado, let's get to the data, and that's why I'm actually here today. So on this slide, just breaking it down, what we're looking at is data comparing year to year. So the Realtors Association has phenomenal data. This comes directly from Florida Realtors. It's Broward County specific. It does take a little bit of time to clean up the data and aggregate it, so this is April to April, but this is the most recent data we have. May is going to be released soon. It's typically released in the middle of the month for the month in arrears. So this is April 2025, looking back to April 2024. And what we're seeing on the top row is single family homes. On the bottom row, townhouses and condos. And I felt it was important to show this graphic and have the differentiation so you can see, housing at different styles and types all across the county. And then that frames the condo conversation a little better. So what we're seeing is sales are down a little bit. Sale prices are down a little bit. We are not having the red hot market that we had post-COVID, but that's okay because that was not a normal market. That was an accelerated market, people buying houses sight unseen, waiving all contingencies, bidding wars, all cash. That is not a normal market. We are now in a stabilized normal market where there's ebbs and flows, but we had long said that it was a supply and demand and inventory issue. And, our partners at government were working on that. Some of our developers were working on that. So we're starting to see a little bit more of that. But I won't lie to you all. Some of it too is the affordability that comes with property insurance and these assessments. Some of these baked in costs that may not have been top of mind when these individuals first bought their property are now causing them to leave Florida and leave these beautiful communities that we call home. So we're seeing it with single family, sales down a little bit, median sales price down a little bit, median time from list to sale, that's how long the property sits on the market, that's up. So properties are taking longer to sell. The same is true with condos and townhouses, even more so than single family homes. Sales are down almost 20% from at this point last year. The median sales price is down a little bit, but it's not quite even 1%. So that's just some market fluctuations. That's probably, some instances of sellers being a little overzealous. We all love our properties and think our properties, amazing and worth X amount, and that might not be what the market thinks. But again, with condos, the time on market has gone up to over 90 days, over 3 months. So that's something that we certainly were not seeing during COVID. I mean, everyone was flocking here, rushing to be in Florida to take advantage of work from home. And then they found out we have hurricanes and we have high property insurance and we have these special assessments that really do cause issues when we're talking about affordability. And we can go to the next slide. So here are some more metrics comparing single family homes and townhouses and condos. So in the leftmost column, we have active inventory. This is how many properties were on the market in April of 2025 compared to last year in April. So we're seeing increased inventory. That's a good thing. We want increased inventory. We want people to have options. This is one area where condos are surpassing single family homes. We're seeing 41% increased inventory compared to where we were last year. Now, keep in mind, days on market being longer is probably also inflating this number a little bit because the inventory is more robust. Properties are staying on the market longer. There's more options for longer. New listings. These are listings that go live in the month. So this is more of a seasonal metric. There are less properties going live in April 2025 than in April 2024. And then a really interesting metric to me is month supply. It's exactly how it sounds. It is telling you if you paused all properties going on the market as of April 2025, how many months would it take to sell all of those properties? How many months would we have a supply? And that's up. So that goes hand in hand with the inventory numbers. Single family homes last year was around 4 months supply. Now it's, above 5.5. With condos, there's a really big uptick. Last year it was not quite 7.5 months. Now it's over a year. So this is showing that some of these assessments really are affecting the market because there's inventory, but people aren't buying the way they were. And it's possible that these assessments and high insurance costs are scaring people away. And we can go to the next slide. So this breaks it down in more of a visual closed sale. You can see this is a 2-year breakdown from April 2023 to April 2025. So we had a little bit of the red hot post-COVID market winding down in April and May and June of 2023. We saw some closed sales dip a little bit until January of last year, and then they upticked again. What is this uptick? Oh, does that coincide with season? Yes, it does. And then it goes down again, and we see less closed sales in the summer. That's not surprising. We all know what Florida summers are like. And then hurricane season, obviously not as many properties are being sold then, not as many people are looking then, and then it ticks back up. So this is where you're seeing a come down from a faster paced abnormal market into a more normalized and shifted market. And we can go to the next slide. Here's a chart that jumps all around the average sale price. This kind of mimics what I was saying about the seasonality of the market. You're seeing, average prices kind of in the middle of the graph to the left. And these are all condos, by the way. When we shifted to the graphs, this is specifically townhome and condo data. We're seeing dips in the summer, so properties selling for less, average sales price in the summer, and then jumping up again in November, December, a lull around the holidays, and then back up when we're in season, a little bit of normalcy in the spring months, and then back down again as we head into summer and hurricane season. And then at the beginning of this year, things have been staying relatively high comparatively to the rest of the graph. But we expect, there's probably going to be a dip in average sales price going into the summer months, as we've seen in the past 2 years. And then median time to sale, this again is days on market, specifically for townhouses and condos. So we saw a big uptick over the last year into 2024, and then a very large uptick from mid 2024 to about the summer months, a little bit of a dip and a climb again, and then a dip. So what this is essentially telling us is we have developers putting units on the market, and we have people selling and getting out of Broward County. Here, month supply, it's a steady climb. That was back to the colorful chart earlier, showing that we went from, I believe it was 7.5 months supply of condos last year in April to over a year supply at this time, or at this point this year in April, excuse me. So this is a metric that we're not quite sure how it's going to go. We like to see supply. All of this, and you'll see at the last slide, is a summary, but all of this essentially is telling us we're returning to a little bit of a mixed market, more of a normal market, but this is really a great opportunity for first-time home buyers, for retirees coming down. Maybe it's the industry optimism, but realtors don't believe in any such, bad market. There's always a good time to buy and look at property, but we really need to look at the causes for some of these data shifts and get it in front of our consumers. We can move to the next slide. Active inventory, again, inventory is going up, which is good for affordability, but it may be raising warning signs when it comes to why are we having additional active inventory aside from the new units that developers are putting on the market. And as I've mentioned, it could be because of those high insurance costs and those hidden fees and significant assessments. And then here is our last slide. This essentially just gives you a snapshot of the Broward County market. The top half of the graph, or the chart rather, is single family homes, giving you 7 data points that we like to look at, comparing April 2024 to April 2025. You can see closed sales is a negative percentage. Paid in cash is going down. Median sales price is down, but not very significantly. And original price received, that's down a little bit, but not significantly. So that's showing that, utilizing realtors and having market professionals, pricing strategies are working. The sales price is typically, in lockstep with where the market's at, but sellers might not be closing the sales or might not be putting their properties on the market as readily as they were in these red hot markets of the post-COVID years. And there's less paid in cash. So we're seeing less outside, California and New York work from home salaries coming to our no state income tax state, and, inflating the market a little bit. We're more in a normal market. And then the latter half of the chart is townhouses and condos, again, mimicking single family homes to an extent. There's a slight difference in the percentages. The condo market is a little more volatile. It's a little more susceptible to market impacts. So that's what we're seeing in some of the percentages. But the good news is we do have supply, and first-time home buyers, hopefully, and young families and retirees will be able to take advantage of this market. But we do need to look at the reasons why people are leaving Florida. Next time I get with you all, we have great data on which states are still coming down to Florida and which states are we losing our residents to, where are people moving from Florida and changing their residency in favor of. So with that, that was my very brief presentation. I appreciate you all allowing me to share some of our data and insights with you.
Nate, thank you so much. That was fantastic. And again, I appreciate the Realtor Association and all the data. I'm a data nerd, so I'm looking at it every month, having conversations. Like I said, I mean, even when you put out that first slide, $630,000 is mind-boggling to me. But I appreciate it. We are over time. I want to thank everyone that joined us. I want to make sure to thank our sponsors, PNC Bank and Wells Fargo, for helping to fund this workshop series. Nate did leave a link there. We do have a brief survey. If you could fill it out, we would appreciate it. And then you could visit us at our website at ccbroward.org to receive or to see the recording of this call. Thank you to Nate. Thank you to Jane. Thank you to Nancy. And thank you, of course, to the Senator for her leadership. Thank you for joining us and see you next time. Have a great day, everyone.